Was Aaron Roderick serious with his tampering comment?
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the number one sports podcast network out there. Thank you all, especially my everydayers, for helping make that the case. Walker Eget is making his way across the country from San Jose State to Duke, but he's, in a state that has another school that's in the same conference as the one he's going to now. What does all that mean? We'll explore actually interesting components, but I wanted to throw that out there anyway. Is Iowa State going to be at the bottom of the Big 12? That will be discussed on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. But first, Jake Hatch of Locked On BYU Cougars is here because I did a double take. I texted you, actually, to make sure that this wasn't AI.
Yeah.
Aaron Roderick, BYU's offensive coordinator, steps to the mic after a practice up in Provo and says he's reluctant to say anything nice about young players for fear that they will be tampered with. Mm-hmm. Was this tongue-in-cheek, or is he serious?
I think there are equal parts of him being a little bit facetious with it, Spencer, but he's also acknowledging the reality of what's going on in college football. Now, I've seen it on social media, some of the reaction. Well, does he not know there's not a spring transfer portal window? No, he's aware that there's no transfer portal window. He knows that. I think he's just being wary of putting anybody seemingly on anybody else's radar and potentially saying, hey, this guy's really, really good. Well, other programs, their antenna is going to go up and say, hey, let's keep an eye on that kid, and if he develops, maybe we try and steal him off BYU's roster.
Do you think that's a concern he's projecting for the future to the next transfer portal window, or is he potentially thinking about something I have brought up on this show recently, which is the idea, and I've heard this get suggested by more than a couple people, I'm sure you have as well, that there could be players during or after spring ball that are going to just unenroll and re-enroll in another school and essentially create an unlimited constant transfer portal window.
Well, he watched that happen with Jake Retzloff just this past year. Remember, Jake was facing a multi-game suspension with regards to his civil lawsuit that involved sexual assault. He decided, you know what? I'm not going to live by that. He unenrolled at BYU, enrolls at Tulane, and ultimately leads the Green Wave to a college football playoff berth. Now, I think it's a bit of a special circumstance there, but he has seen it play out in real time with his own players. I would imagine he's thinking more down the line towards the next transfer portal window, actually, Spencer, but you can never be too certain because, yes, Dellinger's mentioned this from Yahoo Sports, like the fear of a player or players out there deciding, you know what, try stopping me in terms of unenrolling wherever I'm at currently and enrolling somewhere else and obviously cashing in on that. There is a legit fear with that. I would imagine that you have to monitor all of it because let's be real, the college football universe, it is an absolute roller coaster right now, and you can never be sure of what's going to happen next.
No, and that's why there will be a vote on the potential to bring about penalties, whether they get upheld in the courts or not.
Sure.
The NCAA and Division I Council, they've got to at least try, right, to enforce some amount of penalty for a school that's going to go about this, because everybody got rid, or at least the folks that make these decisions, they got rid of the spring transfer portal window for a reason. They didn't like it. I think Tennessee with Nico Iamaleava was probably one of the flagship examples of, man, I don't want that to happen at my program. When spring practice, a year ago at this time, it's crazy to think about, but a year ago at this time, Jake, everybody assumed that Nico Iamaleava, off of a playoff appearance as a starting quarterback for the Tennessee Volunteers, was going to be their starter in 2025. And then he wasn't. And I understand coaches that don't want to go through spring ball and then have the ability for their players to just decide, okay, I'm going elsewhere. And so that's why they got rid of the spring portal window. But that's also why the penalties, I think, have to be considered and should be passed. Really, you might need an antitrust exemption to make these rules enforceable for the NCAA, which, as I discussed recently, might be the best of bad options. But it might be the most logical path to go down, because you just cannot expect coaches and teammates to deal with this all the time, right?
Well, yeah, and you would like to think that they would, at some point in the not too distant future, they wouldn't have to worry about this all the time. But until, as you mentioned, something comes about that is going to have a punitive measure attached to it to stop people from potentially doing this, it's always going to be a constant threat. And yeah, that's why I believe it was partially tongue-in-cheek, facetious from Aaron Roderick to say, hey, I don't want to comment on younger players, but I think it's also just acknowledging the reality of what it is. You and I both know that I work for a radio station in Salt Lake City, Utah, and we are the broadcast home of the Utah State Aggies. Spencer, this time last year, we have the play-by-play voice of the Utah State Aggies on our staff. He, speaking of the guy who, literally broadcasts the games, was barred from attending spring practices by Bronco Mendenhall for fear of anything leaking out. That, I know that seems like almost like overkill, but that is the reality these coaches are existing in right now. I know it's at the G6 level, but it's existing at every level, BYU at the Power 4 level, and even beyond that. You mentioned Tennessee and Nico Iamaleava. All of this is all mixed together, and until you mention there's something to really stop it from happening, it's going to continue to be a constant threat.
It's not just Bronco Mendenhall, by the way. I think the amount of practice access in Eugene for Oregon now compared to what it used to be is severely less. And I think it's good strategy if you're a coach. I think it's unfortunate because the folks that are wanting to go and cover practice and write about players, they're trying to do their jobs. They're trying to be that connection point between fans and the team and give them an idea of who looks good, who's standing out. But I don't think that it's going to go in the other direction. I think it'll keep going down this path that we're talking about, where coaches are saying, yeah, we don't want anybody in. We don't want to see anything. And I don't think that is a good thing for college football fans, because it leads to them feeling more disconnected from the team than they otherwise would be.
Well, and that's what this sport has been built on, is that connection between the fans and their team. You cut back access, you don't allow the reporters or whoever else to tell the stories of these players. Well, yeah, that connection, it doesn't develop. And with this day and age of the transfer portal and guys essentially being on one-year deals, Spencer, the connection between fan and program has never been more at risk. And that's ultimately going to affect, I think, the bottom line for programs. No matter how much they may make in media rights deals, we're talking about kind of that intrinsic value of the connection between your fan base and your program. That is very much at risk of being lost. Yeah,
I'm with you there. I think there are some particularly older fans that already have kind of checked out. Now, the television viewership numbers suggest that we're overstating this, but I think that what that's also a result of is, in the age of mass media, the sport is becoming more popular and you're pulling in more casual fans. But for the long-term diehards that just want to know about their team and players, and they want to have guys and trust that they're going to be a part of the program. I saw something recently that each conference on the college basketball front, all the Power 4 leagues have, I think, less than 15 players that were 4 or 5 year retained players on the roster from the time they began their college careers. Like less than 15 per team. And in college football, we're going down that same sort of path. I mean, thousands of kids get into the portal every single year.
And that's what BYU, I know Kalani Sitake is trying to counter that. He's made no bones about the fact that he said, if you're going to come to BYU simply for a paycheck, Spencer, he says, I don't want you here. I want you here for more than just a paycheck. Because as he said, if you're just in it for the money, you're not in it for the right reasons. And that's nice of him to say that. Obviously, I think the proof is in the pudding. He's done a really good job at retaining the talent at BYU, but how long does that really last? And that is the concern I have for BYU, but that extends to literally every other program in college football, is that, yeah, you can say all the nice things, you can do your absolute best to keep guys around, but they've got a lot of people around them telling them a lot of different things, and it really depends on their internal motivation as to what they're ultimately going to do.
Well, maybe Aaron Roderick was just having some fun and we're overblowing this entire thing. That's what we hope, but I don't know. Tampering's a pretty easy thing to do.
I'm telling you, I think it's equal parts him just having some fun, but I also think there's a legit concern, and it carries over not just to BYU, for every program across the country.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. But hey, that's college football. We still love it despite all of its flaws. Jake Hatch, Locked On BYU, great as always. The reigning ACC champs, like the quietest conference champion of all time. Can they get back there next year? Well, probably not.
I'm Clea Butler, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and this is Mazda's Women's Basketball Snapshot, celebrating the work no highlight reel can ever capture. Number 1 ranked UConn dominated St. John's 85-49 on Sunday at Madison Square Garden, extending its winning streak to 47 games. The Huskies capped a perfect 31-0 regular season, including 20-0 in the Big East. UConn is winning by nearly 38 points per game, the third largest average margin in Division I history. Since 1999 to 2000, UConn has 9 undefeated regular seasons, as many as all other programs combined, and has turned 6 of those into national championships. These moments are earned off the clock, those long before the lights ever come on. The sweat, the fakes, the doubt, the scrapes, and coming back for more every time. Mazda puts that same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment, putting in the work, that defines you. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you.
Can Duke run it back with Walker Eget at quarterback this year with Darian Mensah, of course, down in Miami? To answer that question, we've got JJ Jackson of Locked On Blue Devils here to discuss. Let's start right there, JJ. Is Duke someone that should be seen as an ACC championship contender with Walker Eget there after winning the league a year ago in what has to be one of the quietest, most unassuming conference championship wins in recent college football memory?
Yeah, Spencer, hard to argue with a lot of that, man. Excited to be able to talk about a Duke ACC football championship, the first since 1989. So that alone, I think you got to respect the team with the belt. However, I do know that the quarterback position dictates everything that we do in this sport. And the fact that Darian Mensah at one point was coming back for another season at Duke. We had the whole legal saga that played out, and now he's playing elsewhere. That's clearly a step back. This is a guy that you're replacing who set your program record in so many passing categories. And on top of that, leading you to your first conference title since the 80s. That's going to be really difficult for anybody to replicate. But for the Blue Devils, you feel really good that Walker Eget was able to get this medical waiver, was able to get this additional year of eligibility because he's a guy who's got experience playing college football, starting in games, which right now the quarterback room before that didn't have a whole lot of that at all.
Yeah, there was a waiver approval process that, of course, went his way, and Duke would have been really hung out to dry. I mean, the timing of Mensah's departure, of course, put him in a pretty bad spot, leaving the last day the portal was open. Doesn't exactly give you time to go and try and find a quarterback, and by that point in the musical chairs of quarterback movement in the transfer portal, there had just about been every good guy that had found a home. He'd already been, whoever he could have been, we'll never know. But you wind up with Eget. There are worse options. I think that Manny Diaz and company could have gone out and find. I think he was the best available at the time. If Mensah had left, say, third day the portal open, I don't think Eget would have been Duke's top choice at quarterback. I think that's fair to say. But how has this all been received in Durham over the last couple weeks as everything is settled down and they get ready for spring ball?
Yeah, I think it's still a total shock that it's not going to be Darian Mensah, right? I think that, in all honesty, the news hasn't been received positively or negatively against Walker Eget. It's just frustration that Darian Mensah is not the quarterback. It could have been anybody, truthfully, and I don't know that there would have been this crazy reaction because you just have such high and vivid and emotional memories attached to what Mensah had just done at the position. But when you break it down, when you look at the numbers, when you look at his ability, for the most part, Walker Eget to take care of the football and be able to be an effective passer. I mean, this was the San Jose offense that this past season ranked top 10 in yards per air completion. I mean, that's something that you really like to see if you're a Duke football fan, like you could start to talk yourself into it a little bit. But the reality is it's not the guy you wanted. It's a rebound in some essences, and nobody wants to be a rebound. Nobody wants to be in the market looking for a rebound.
Yeah, I think that's an unfortunately accurate way to see it for Eget and how he's going to be viewed in the eyes of Blue Devil fans. So based on what you've researched and watched with him, what can he do? What's his greatest strength? Like, what does a Walker Eget highlight reel snapshot look like to you?
I think it looks a lot like what Duke's had at quarterback the last couple of seasons in terms of the makeup of Jonathan Brewer's offense. I think back to Malik Murphy coming over from Texas, Darian Mensah coming over from Tulane, and thinking that there could be a little bit more using their legs a little bit, and that just was not a part of the makeup whatsoever. I got good news for people. Walter Eget's not a runner either, and this is a guy who's coming off an ACL tear, so that's going to be a tough recovery process, and I think he's going to be pretty limited in terms of the spring work that's put in going into the season. So in that regard, not mobile. But what he's been able to do, I mentioned being top 10 nationally and passing the football down the season. The air yards are there. A deep downfield passer has been there. I think that's going to be something that really pops when you watch him take snaps in this Duke offense, and really excited to see what that looks like moving forward here for Duke.
I think the unfortunate pressure for him, and obviously I want your thoughts on this, is that Duke's defense last year was pretty bad. The reason they were in the ACC Championship game was the offense was able to overcome a lot of defensive lapses. And I think that's a little bit odd for a former defensive coordinator to not have that side of the ball at least be league average. I mean, a league average defense would have been great for Duke last year, but they just struggled generating stops consistently, and Mensah, partially out of necessity, was able to go out and just win you a bunch of games that you wouldn't otherwise have done by throwing for 320, 340, whatever, and several touchdowns time and again. Can Eget fill any of that sort? Obviously, he's going to fill some of that production, but how much of a step back do you anticipate offensively for the Blue Devils with Walker Eget in there?
Yeah, especially, I mean, we haven't even gotten to the wideouts and position that he's going to, the weapons around him. And that is certainly going to take a hit with guys going in the transfer portal, graduation, and then Cooper Barkate, who Duke thought was coming back on a same deal, kind of set up with Darian Mensah, follows Mensah down to South Beach. And so they're both going to be playing for the Miami Hurricanes. That part stings a little bit. I think Duke's offense, though, in some respects, might not have as big of a fall off in terms of the points that they're putting up, because they do bring back freshman All-American running back Nate Shepard. I think the running game is going to be a massive part of what Duke does moving the football this season. That's not flashy at all for a quarterback whatsoever, but if Walker Eget does his job, takes care of the football, utilizes Nate Shepard and the running backs for Duke, the next thing you know, they could be winning games, and then you're not as the quarterback's not as big of a deal, because at the end of the day, you're looking at a team that has won games rather than losing them because of quarterback play, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Do you think the defense will take a big enough step forward? Because if Duke is going to contend for an ACC championship again, I just think they're going to have to. I don't think you can go into next year with going from Mensah to Eget and having the same level of defense. I mean, it's even with Mensah and how good he was, it's a minor miracle that they had a chance to play for a conference championship. They just lost the right games, of course, going into that situation. But do you think that defense will be better?
I think it has to be, like you said. And I think, truthfully, time will tell. Not to give you a cop-out answer here, but I'm really curious to see what the spring practice looks like for Duke. I'm excited to hear what Manny Diaz has to say about this unit coming together. Duke will have a couple of defensive guys off of last year's team hear their name called in the NFL draft, which hasn't happened in quite some time. But I think VJ Anthony and Chandler Rivers have done enough to hear themselves start their professional careers. That's exciting, but that means that there's opportunity for younger guys to step up and kind of take over in the defensive side of things for Duke. So a lot of younger players going to get opportunities. A lot of guys that they're just now bringing over from the transfer portal will be making big plays for the defense this season. But you are totally spot on, Spencer. If Duke wants to contend, I said we've got the belt to start our conversation today. If we want to hold on to it, you got to make sure that you're playing defense.
One game where defense will be important down in this place called Coral Gables, Florida, a little bit later in the season. I don't know. It should be, indeed. And I don't know what Darian Mensah keeps doing. Well, I do know. I just don't know how he keeps winding up playing the team that he just left, did it last year, and lost, of course, to Tulane in that non-conference matchup. But just looking at that particular game, which I'm sure will be very charged for Duke fans and for some of the players and staff, I imagine, as well. Are they anywhere close to where you feel like Miami's going to be next year?
Yeah, it's really hard to say that. I mean, there's the optimist in me that always wants to say that, right? But realistically speaking, no, I don't think so. I mean, that game is also just so late in the season, third to last game of the year for Duke, and that's a stretch where it's Miami, Clemson, and Wake Forest to close out your season. So that in itself, off name recognition in previous seasons with Miami and Clemson back-to-back, could be daunting for Duke. But like I said, the energy of it all surrounding Darian Mensah and the way this all ended, the fact that it had to end in a settlement, I mean, it's just so unprecedented in so many ways that we're going to see something like this in college sports. I'll be glued to the TV, man. I can't wait to see how he's received the interactions and conversations that he has with former teammates, now turned opponents. When the game kicks off, what does it look like between him and Manny Diaz, him and offensive coordinator Jonathan Brewer? Like, I can't wait for all of that. But no, I don't think that Duke's step for step with Miami right now. I think the Hurricanes are a good bit ahead.
Well, we'll just see if it's a trap game for Miami when
hopefully.
when November rolls around. JJ Jackson, Locked On Blue Devils, great as always. We're flipping back to the Big 12 to wrap today's show. Is Iowa State destined to be a bottom dweller? Jimmy Rogers doesn't think so. What do I think? Stick around and find out. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at TurboTax. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient. Sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth, and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to TurboTax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment. Check out TurboTax today. This episode also brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. The biggest stretch of the college basketball season is almost here. Buzzer beaters, bracket busters, and those unforgettable moments that everyone's talking about the next day. Being there live for something like that, it's bucket list stuff. The hard part is always actually getting the tickets. Long queues, prices jumping at checkout, and surprise fees. None of that is what you want to deal with. You want to deal with Game Time, the app that gives fans the advantage with constant innovation. It's how you unlock amazing tickets and experiences in just a few taps. And look, I've got several tickets to 2 different types of events on my phone right now that I purchased using Game Time. Why? Because the process is simple. You get a great deal. I know what to expect when I show up to the arena or ballpark, wherever I happen to be going. No stress, no guesswork. Take the guesswork out of buying college basketball tickets as well with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. So Iowa State head coach Jimmy Rogers is confident his team is not going to finish in last place. And I think it's really easy to dunk on the Cyclones' 2026 outlook. Here's what I'd encourage you to do. If you're someone, and I think it's a valid opinion to have, I don't have it personally because I trust his track record, even though it'll be just his 4th overall season as a head coach. Just answer this question for me. If you think that Iowa State is going to wind up being a bottom dweller, and I've thought about it. That's why I think it's a valid point of view. Just answer me this question. How many differences between Jimmy Rogers' situation at Washington State last year were there from what he's going into this year at Iowa State? What is the brand new undertaking? Bringing a bunch of guys from a previous school at a level that's not the same as the league you're coaching in now? Check. First year, massive transfer portal roster overhaul out of necessity, because when the last guy left, a lot of players left as well. Check. Maybe they won't be as good at the quarterback position. Maybe they will. I'm just saying, I've seen the guy do it before. Now, I don't think this is Indiana. I've got a lot of respect for the rest of the Big 12, and I do think that it is too daunting of a task to do that. And also, again, I just fell into a classic modern-day college football trap, and that is comparing anything to Kurt Cignetti in Indiana. It's not fair. It's not reasonable. It shouldn't really be done. Contextually, sure, you can pop it into your mind every now and then. But Iowa State's schedule this year, you don't have Texas Tech. That's about the only good news that you've got. The battle for the Cy-Hawk Trophy, boy, Iowa better win that game. I'll just say that. I don't think anybody that is a part of Hawkeye Nation is going to disagree with me there. That game is in Iowa City, not in Ames. Week 2. Iowa State got them last year. No excuses. Even though Iowa's got a question at the quarterback position, no excuses there. And I do think Iowa will win that game. So why don't we write in one loss there for Iowa State? Their other non-conference games, because they have a Power 4, of course, I will not criticize. Southeast Missouri and Bowling Green, they should win both of those. Fun note for those of you that really remember college football recruiting, former 4-star quarterback and former Oregon quarterback Austin Novosad transferred to Bowling Green this offseason. We'll see if he starts. That'd be a fun story. Anyway, the first opportunity at home for a statement is the Big 12 opener against Utah, September 26th. Couple of first-year head coaches. Both programs got hit by the transfer portal. Not as bad up in Salt Lake City, but they lost some notable guys. Maybe you trip them up. It's a long road trip. Maybe. They play West Virginia. Then the tough part begins. No, that's not the tough part. By the way, I think West Virginia will be a much improved football team, even without Nico Marchiol back there at quarterback. At BYU, bye at Arizona. That's not great. Then they play Oklahoma State, at Baylor, Cincinnati, at UCF, Kansas State. Again, does 6 wins, which is what Jimmy Rogers accomplished last year at Washington State, does that feel ridiculous? Does that truly feel so out of the realm of possibility that you're just going to write Iowa State into the bottom of the league? I'm not putting them at the top of the conference. I don't think it can all come together like that. You've got a couple games on there where Iowa State's going to be at a roster disadvantage. How many other ones are there going to be? I mean, sure, UCF is in year 2 with Scott Frost, and they quietly had a pretty solid season last year. Okay, maybe you don't get them in Orlando. Kansas State's probably better than you. You got a quarterback advantage there, but you got them at home to end the regular season. You never know. I mean, Kansas State's going to have a lot of urgency to win that game after what happened to them last year over in Ireland, of course. But everybody else, Baylor with DJ Lagway, Cincinnati without Brendan Sorsby, Oklahoma State is building up from the bottom. I don't think there are that many games that they've got no shot. Like on paper, games that I look at on this schedule for Iowa State and say, based on the transfer portal class that they've brought in, the number of times I say they've got little to no shot. At Iowa, little to no shot. At BYU, probably even less of a shot. At Arizona, not particularly likely. Utah at home, probably too tough of a task. Everything else, manageable. So Jimmy Rogers is a guy that's done a lot of winning in his career. He's going to have enough physical bodies, but maybe just barely, to get through the college football season. That was a legitimate concern at one point in time, but they brought in 47 transfers. It's not a super highly rated class. It doesn't have a bunch of guys that you or I have heard of or that we're tracking in the offseason. But guess what? There are a bunch of guys that Jimmy Rogers knows, a bunch of guys that were in his system last year at Washington State, that know how he wants to play football, that know what the expectation and standard is. I think Iowa State, for a number of pundits going into this year, is going to be a popular pick to finish dead last in the Big 12. I will not pick them there. I agree with the Cyclones head coach. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.